This episode of JT's Random Stuff is brought to you by my bank account. Tune until the end to find out more. Can we take a minute to appreciate that this man only has one more film left in his career? This mastermind of cinema, who has created some of the most influential films of the past 25 years, says that he's only making 10 movies, and his most recent film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, being his 9th film. It's safe to say that this legend only has one more film to go until retirement. Unless he decides to pull a John Farnham on us, but that's very unlikely. Either way, we really want to say thank you for creating memories that will last a lifetime. However, I couldn't help but notice that his most recent film is kinda going under people's radars. There's quite a few videos online popping up smashing his most recent film, and I'll be the first to admit that it's not his best film, by a long shot. However, it's still really fun to watch. And to be able to talk about this film first, we must go back to the start. His first film, Reservoir Dogs, a low-budget crime film which is one of the best films of 1992. With its extreme violence, amazing dialogue, and that torture scene. It really is amazing, seriously recommend it. His second film, Pulp Fiction, redefined a generation of indie filmmakers. This is seriously one of the best films ever made. And if you haven't seen it, stop watching right now and go see it. Treat yourself, thank me later. His third film, Jackie Brown, is probably his most underrated film, and it is clear to see why. Compared to the other films in his filmography, bar from one, this is his most tamest film by far. Hell, it's the only film of his which isn't rated for violence in Australia. But it's still a good heist movie. The last act of the movie is very enjoyable. I still recommend it though. His fourth film, Kill Bill, is a landmark in film history. And besides Pulp Fiction, this is the film of his I see the most in pop culture. This is also arguably his most violent film, with the final battle with the Crazy 88 having to be partially edited to black and white to be able to meet an R rating in America and not an MC-17. This is also his longest film, clocking in just over 4 hours. I know they split the movie into two, however he sees it as one film and so do I. One does not function without the other. I will say though I do prefer Volume 1 over 2, just because of that amazing fight at the end, and I believe the pacing in the first one is a little bit better as opposed to 2. In saying that though, 2 has a lot more talking and focuses a lot more on Bill as a character. Hell, you don't even see his face until the start of part 2. Also, my favourite fight in the film does come in the second one when the bride fights Ellie Driver in Bud's caravan in the desert. Which also, Volume 2 kinda has a bit of a western feel about it. You never know, he might come back to this in the future, who knows. Anyway, Kill Bill is an amazing film, I highly recommend it. Death Proof. It's a bad movie on purpose. This is one half of the Grindhouse double feature along with Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror. This is my least favourite of his films and it's the one I've come back to the least. Inglourious Basterds is a masterpiece. From the pacing, the storytelling, the cinematography, this film really does feel like his magnum opus. He even states it at the end of the film. Christoph Waltz gives one of the best performances out of any character in any Quentin Tarantino movie. Maybe except for Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction, Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs, Uma Thurman in Kill Bill, John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, Larry in Kill Bill. Okay, maybe there's a lot of great performances in Tarantino films, but maybe it's because he's the smartest character out of any of his films, and he knows it too. You just don't know what he's thinking. When he's talking to Shoshana in the restaurant, does he know it's the girl that escaped in the intro? Is he deciding whether or not to let her go, expose her, kill her? You just don't know. That's what makes this performance so scary and brilliant. I love the scene at the end with Diane Kruger in the cinema. The tension is real. He knows, but she doesn't know that he knows. He's planning what to do in his head, thinking about how he can gain from this situation for the rest of his life, while at the same time being very funny and quite sinister. This character is just amazing, and this film is amazing. I seriously recommend it. Django Unchained is my favorite Tarantino movie. I love the adventure, I love the revenge plot, I love the characters. Leo gives one of the most entertaining performances of his entire career. Christoph Waltz is amazing, but that's a given at this point. Just give him his Oscar already. And this film is just so much fun to watch. I must at least watch this film 2 times a year. It never gets old. This is my second favorite film of all time, and I seriously recommend it right now if you haven't seen it. The Hateful Eight. The first R18 film I have ever seen in the cinema. I was blown away by its extreme violence, amazing performances, incredible score. This film, without a doubt, has the best musical score out of any Tarantino film. I like how dark this film gets as opposed to his other films as well. It really does feel like an old western that was made in the 60s. And I seriously love that about it. The pacing is a bit slow, but that doesn't bother me. I've got an amazing attention span. I can stare at a white wall for like 5 hours and not get bored. In the long run, this film is amazing from the start to its gory end. Right, we've made it to the climax. His most recent film, the one that got the most cringiest standing ovation of all time, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is a great film, and here is why. Have you noticed something in common with the 8 films I've talked about on this list so far? Violence. Lots and lots and lots of violence. If this film was another gory, over-the-top bloodfest, we'd start to ask the question, is this guy only one note? Can he make a film without violence driving the story? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, he can. This film's first actual kill in the movie is over 2 hours into the film. Also, Tarantino is kind of the last filmmaker of old Hollywood. I believe Scorsese is also one of the only people left from old Hollywood. And this film is a straight-up homage to that last year of old Hollywood. I mean, from watching the streets in their full 60s glory to seeing Brad without his shirt on, watching Rick practice his lines in his pool to watching Brad without his shirt on, seeing the Playboy Mansion with Steve McQueen and seeing Brad without his shirt on. The whole scene where Cliff goes to the Manson Ranch is some of the best directed tension I've seen in any film anywhere, and seeing Brad without his shirt on. Watching Rick flub his lines only to come back later and blow them away with the best performance of his career, and seeing Brad without his shirt on. And of course, watching Margot Robbie watching the late Sharon Tate on screen is some of the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen in a theater. With Brad without his shirt on, this film is by far the most laid back and tamest film next to Jackie Brown. However, the end of this film will go down as the stuff of legends. It is by far one of the most hilarious, satisfying, gory, over-the-top climaxes you will ever see in a film ever. I will never forget the theater's reaction to this scene. It truly was amazing. And the ending shot where Sharon Tate is alive and meeting Rick out the front of her house is seriously touching. And I love how the title comes onto the screen in this part. Throughout the whole film, it doesn't really give a reason why it's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You think it'd be better called A Day in Hollywood. But the way it slowly comes onto the screen, you slowly realize that this was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In real life, this story was horrific and not only changed Hollywood forever, but films forever. But seeing that Sharon lived at the end of this film, that change would never have happened. Rick might have gone on to star in a Polanski film, becoming one of the biggest stars in the world alongside Sharon. You can see what would have become as opposed to what we got. It is a very emotional, bittersweet ending and really stands out as one of the most complex endings to any of his films. So, in summing up, is this film a masterpiece? No. There's definitely a few pacing issues here and there, and the first hour does drag a little bit, and the Playboy Mansion scene does go a little bit too long and doesn't really impact the film very much until the end. However, though, this is the best kind of film for him to be making at this point in his career. I'm sure that his last film will be an over-the-top glory slaughterhouse, and I, for one, can't wait to watch it. As I'm sure you can't either. But before that, take a moment to appreciate this grounded fairy tale of old-school Hollywood that has seriously been lacking from cinema lately. I mean, this is an original film, not a reboot, sequel, franchise. This is just a one-off, kick-back, relaxed film that we hardly get these days. Not everything has to be fast-paced, in-your-face, blowing up with like a CGI clusterfuck all in your face. No, it's nice to just stop and relax and watch a film. And I believe that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is Tarantino's underrated gem. And I, for one, can't wait to watch it over and over again. But next time, I think I might get one of those acid dip cigarettes.
Away we go.